The aura farmer this time? A washed-up swordmaster who used to swing blades for a whole damn Dracula. Bro was peak, top-tier raid boss material, until that vamp kidnapped his siblings and forced him into a Dark Souls duel with another bloodsucker from the neighbor kingdom. He actually won, but the price tag? Both his limbs. Now he's chilling with prosthetics like it's a retirement arc, sipping fake peace and pretending he ain't benched. But Fate's got zero chill. His siblings get yoinked again, this time by Naggi, his jealous ex-homie turned full-time vampire simp. Our boy pulls up, tries to throw hands, but without his core, he gets folded faster than a Wi-Fi warrior in ranked Smash. Naggi laughs in his face, calls him free loot, and promises to come back tomorrow to farm him again. And just when it's looking like hard game over, bro cracks open mom's secret loot box, a relic from the fallen queen herself. Next thing you know, he's glitch warping 10,000 years into the past, loading back stacked, buffed, and dripping with mystery hacks nobody else got the patch notes for. But here's the catch, fam. The timeline's toxic. Enemies keep respawning, plot twists drop like cursed gacha pulls, and our boy's got a Sigma dodge Lees while grinding his way to survival. So what do you think, G? Will this washed-up sword god finally clap destiny itself? Or get clapped again by Fate's busted patch notes? Let's find out. In a remote castle on the edge of Kushan, a group of warriors moved through its dim, echoing halls. The silence felt wrong. One of them broke it, nervously wondering if their information was faulty. His companion quickly dismissed the doubt, reminding him that the orders came from Lord Xias himself, surely reliable. Another warrior muttered that the place was so deserted, he couldn't even spot a single ant, let alone a magical beast. The reply came just as quickly. Perhaps the rumor of Lord Naggi's arrival had spread. As they continued forward, the men stumbled across a strange and unfamiliar section of the castle. Old, hidden, and absent from their maps. It felt out of place. One of them pointed out an exit with stairs climbing upward. Another suggested sending someone to check the mysterious place. But that idea sparked Lord Naggi's anger. Then, with a firm gesture, he pointed to their true destination. When one man hesitated, Naggi fixed him with a glare and repeated his command, louder this time, leaving no room for argument. Reluctantly, the man stepped forward to scout. At first, he reported nothing unusual, but then the silence broke. From the shadows emerged beasts, wolf-like creatures with glowing red eyes. They lunged forward without hesitation. Panic spread quickly as every door and exit slammed shut, trapping the men inside. Their breaths quickened, their weapons shook in their hands. One warrior shouted desperately, asking what they should do. Naggi's face twisted with fury. He barked at them, saying that if they wanted to survive, they had no choice but to fight. A brutal clash followed. One by one, his men fell to the fangs and claws of the savage monsters. Naggi himself was cornered, a beast about to end him, until, in an instant, it was slain by another's blade. A new figure stood there, calm and almost mocking. He asked Naggi if he thought of himself as a damsel waiting to be saved. The surviving warriors looked up in shock. Their savior was none other than Lord Ransen. With confidence and a glint in his eyes, Ransen told Naggi to watch carefully. Then, drawing his blade, he moved with the speed and precision only a true swordmaster could possess. One strike, and a beast's head fell. The rest pounced, but Ransen cut through them with dazzling skill, his glowing weapon carving a path of destruction. In moments, the floor was littered with fallen beasts. Naggi himself could only whisper his admiration, admitting that swordmasters truly lived on a different level. Yet, bitterness crept into his voice as he claimed he could have handled it alone. Ransen answered coldly. For all of Naggi's silver tongue, his swordsmanship was pitiful. If he wanted strength, he needed to train harder. Naggi, stung but determined, vowed that he would. The scene then shifted, leaving the blood-stained castle behind. In the ruined city of Ilneon, Ransen was greeted by an anxious comrade who asked why he was late. Ransen apologized, explaining that trouble had delayed him, but the man's expression turned grim. Count Xias had arrived, taken the children, and left only a scroll. Breaking the seal, Ransen read the order inside. His eyes hardened. The command was clear. Kill Del Kashu, the blood count of Kashu, a true blood vampire and swordmaster, rival to Xias himself. The messenger was horrified. He cursed their situation, lamenting how Ransen only wished to live peacefully with the children. Yet Xias had bound them to years of dangerous service. Ransen, however, was unmoved. If not for the children, he had no reason to live. The man tried to stop him, warning of Delkashu's terrifying power and the countless experts under his command. But Ransen gave a firm order to Bersoon, telling him to stay behind and protect the siblings. With a confident smile, he promised he would return victorious. As Ransen and his group departed, Bersoon's hands clenched into fists. He whispered to himself that this time he could not follow that order. The scene flashes back in time, March 11th, Continental Year 1337, in the Vanroa Kingdom. The Queen of Vanroa, calm yet resolute, ordered the Knight Commander Bersoon to take young Ransen and flee. Bersoon immediately refused, swearing he would stand and fight at her side until the very end. But the Queen's voice was firm. What mattered now was not her, but the survival of the Vanroa bloodline. She turned to her son, the second prince, still so young, and pleaded with him to live, no matter the cost. Tears ran down the boy's cheeks as he begged not to leave her behind. Gently, she placed a necklace around his neck, promising it would help him one day. With trembling hands, she urged him to rebuild their family's legacy. Bersoon could hardly hold back his emotions as he witnessed her sacrifice. In that moment, he swore his life to the prince, vowing to protect him at all costs. From Bersoon's memory, the tragedy plays out in full. The capital burning, the mighty kingdom of Vanroa, 5 centuries strong, was erased in a single night. Escaping through secret routes, Bersoon carried the prince in his arms. 20 knights and a few noble heirs followed. By April, they had crossed the Roxium border and boarded a ship bound for Robberland. Storms battered them, soldiers hunted them, and by the time they reached Kushan in late August, only 12 knights remained. Even so, Bersoon swore that he would keep the prince alive, alongside the last heirs of dukes and marquises, no matter what shame or hardship awaited. The memory fades, and the scene shifts to Kashu, inside the castle of the dreaded blood count Delkashu. Bersoon fought through its halls, muttering to himself, begging fate to let his prince still be alive. At last, he reached the throne room. Bodies of Ransen's companions lay scattered across the floor. Delkashu stood at the center, a blade lodged in his heart, his robes soaked in blood. And there, barely clinging to life, was Ransen. With a faint smile, he whispered, "It's over." Bersoon's heart broke. Was this truly the end of their lineage, their dreams, their endless struggles? He refused to accept it. Lifting the broken prince into his arms, Bersoon swore again that he would save him, no matter what it cost. 3 years later, the ruins of Ilneon had grown strangely peaceful. Children laughed and played among the stones. Ransen, older now, was on a roof repairing shingles when Bersoon called out to him. Ransen smiled, glad to see his knight return safely, but then slipped off the ladder and landed flat on the ground. Bersoon rushed forward in panic, but Ransen brushed it off with a grin, as if nothing had happened. When asked about Count Cassius's reply, Bersoon reported the same as always. Wait another month. Ransen sighed but accepted it, saying they could manage. Bersoon scolded him for doing hard labor, but Ransen simply replied that he couldn't ask the children to do it instead. Sure enough, Ransen teased him by quoting the line, "If only I had an elixir." Bersoon grumbled in frustration, and it was explained that this legendary medicine of life hadn't been seen in 200 years. Ransen waved the idea away, calling it nothing more than an old tale. Their discussion was cut short when children rushed up in a panic, shouting for Ransen to be careful. In one smooth motion, he raised his prosthetic arm and blocked a falling beam of wood. With a soft smile, he reassured them he had just finished fixing the roof. He wasn't about to let it break again. Then, picking up a wooden sword, he handed it to a young boy. He told him to never let go of his weapon, no matter what. The child, confused, insisted he had been holding it tightly. Ransen chuckled and corrected him. Strength wasn't just in the grip, it was in the legs, in balance, in the center of one's body. He urged the boy to imagine his opponent, to see the battle in his mind, and to stand firm. As Ransen focused, his mind drifted back to the nightmarish battle against Count Delkashu. The clash was vivid in his memory. Steel met steel, sparks flew, and the Count's crushing blow nearly broke him. But Ransen had fought on, clinging to one belief: he could not die, not while there were people depending on him. Then came the moment he'd never forget. The Count's blade cutting clean through his arm. The pain was unbearable, but Ransen didn't retreat. Instead, he charged forward and swung for the Count's neck. That was the will that kept him alive. The memory ended with a sharp crack as Ransen's blade came down on the wooden training dummy before him, splitting it in half. Bearson and the children stood frozen. One muttered, "Ransen," while another shouted, "Master broke the wooden horse." Snapping back to reality, Ransen blinked in confusion. He quickly apologized, rubbing the back of his neck, and explained that he only meant to demonstrate a technique. He didn't realize he'd gotten carried away. With a sheepish smile, he promised he'd fix the dummy later. Just then, a boy rushed in, panic all over his face. He cried out to Master Ransen, saying something terrible had happened. It was Daisy and Seklan. Ransen's expression hardened instantly. He burst inside, calling their names, and stopped. There they were. Daisy, the red-haired girl of the Ilneon family, and Seklan, the blue-haired young man of the same bloodline, locked in a deadly duel with real swords. Before he could intervene, a mocking voice cut in. "Naggi." With a smirk, he greeted Ransen, remarking on his long absence. Ransen's tone turned sharp. "What's going on here?" Naggi smiled as if amused by his anger. He claimed it was nothing more than an interview, testing Daisy and Seklan to see if they had what it took to serve as his direct followers. Fury boiled in Ransen's voice. Who was Naggi to think he could stain the children's bloodline with his schemes? Naggi only sneered, mocking him as a crippled has-been who'd lost his limbs. Ransen demanded if Count Xius knew of this, but Naggi scoffed. The Count, he said, was far too busy to care about small matters. That confirmed it. Naggi had come on his own, knowing full well this land belonged to their family. To make things worse, he brought up the cruel rumor that the great Swordmaster Ransen had lost his limbs because of children. Ransen's anger flared. He warned Naggi to leave quietly or face death, but Naggi only laughed, as if daring him to try. Ransen struck first, a sudden, swift attack. Naggi's men scrambled to block it but were instantly overwhelmed. With his sword glowing with power, Ransen cut them down one by one, reminding them not to underestimate a true Swordmaster. Naggi applauded mockingly, calling him amazing, even brother, but the sinister grin on his face said otherwise. When Ransen pointed out his grudge, Naggi denied it, before his eyes darkened and a bloody aura surged around him. Realizing he couldn't afford a drawn-out fight in his current state, Ransen decided he had to end it in one blow. He dashed in with everything he had. For a moment, it seemed he'd caught Naggi, until his sword shattered against the aura shielding his enemy. Naggi looked down at him with contempt. He revealed the cruel truth. Ransen's core was shattered, his growth forever halted. He mocked him for dreaming of higher ranks and sneered that this was why one needed the power of blood kin. Then, turning his gaze toward Daisy and Seklan, Naggi asked almost casually if he should kill them first. The children trembled. Desperate, Ransen dropped his blade and knelt. He pleaded with Naggi to stop, reminding him that children were present. Naggi burst into laughter. The once proud Swordmaster was now begging. He stepped forward and began his cruel warm-up. Blow after blow, he beat Ransen down. Punches to the face, a crushing kick, then pressing his boot on him as he writhed on the ground. Finally, Naggi leaned back with a cold smile. "I'm a soft-hearted man," he said mockingly. "That's enough for today." With that, he left, promising he would return tomorrow. In the silence that followed, one of the children whispered, voice breaking, "Master, what do we do now?" Still lying on the floor, bruised and battered, Ransen gave them a faint smile. "It's all right." Later that night, Ransen faced Daisy and Seklan with a heavy question. Did they truly want to become Naggi's kin? Seklan bowed his head, apologizing to his master. Daisy, however, remained silent, her crimson eyes filled with defiance. Then, under her breath, she muttered something sharp. Ransen froze, asking what she had just said. Daisy snapped back, her voice cutting like a blade. What was stopping her from serving Xius instead? After all, Ransen had once done the same. Anger flashed in Ransen's eyes. Did she really not understand? Xius wasn't driven by honor. He was consumed by greed. Because of that man, their comrades had fallen, families had perished, and Ransen himself had been left with nothing but prosthetic limbs. Was she truly willing to throw everything away, just to live by taking blood? Daisy's composure shattered. Through tears, she screamed that it was none of his business, asking if he thought himself her father. Her life was hers alone, she shouted, and he had no right to interfere. With that, she stormed out, leaving silence behind. Seclin tried to soothe the tension, gently telling Ransen that Daisy hadn't meant those words. He admitted that kneeling in such moments took courage, and then, noticing his master's pain, offered to fetch a healing potion from Uncle Bersoon. Ransen gave a faint, weary smile, thanking him. Just then, the door burst open. Bersoon rushed in, alarmed, asking if Ransen was all right. A child, Lena, had run to him in a panic, claiming Daisy said Ransen and Naggi had fought. Bersoon confirmed her story, while Ransen, instead of being angry, let out a small laugh. He thanked them all, accepted the potion, and quietly whispered his thanks to Daisy as well. Later, alone in his room, Ransen's strength faltered. He coughed violently, blood staining his prosthetic hand. With a sigh, he admitted that if his core were still intact, someone like Naggi would be no threat at all. But he pushed the thought away. Protecting the children, that was all that mattered now. Still, the shadow of tomorrow lingered. Naggi's return weighed heavily on his mind. From his belongings, he drew out the royal necklace of Vanroa. Selling it could buy the children safety, unlike the royal seal, which the Empire would track. As he turned the necklace in his hand, his gaze fell upon the Book of Fate. Why was it called a royal treasure? Opening it, he read of an event dated March 17, 4673 in the Rosaris calendar, a secret vow made by a cult in some hidden church. To his surprise, the ancient words flowed clearly in his mind. Then, a sudden brilliance burst from the pages. A mark of the holy star flared to life, and in the blink of an eye, Ransen vanished from his room. When his vision cleared, he was sprinting down a dark corridor. His breath quickened. This wasn't illusion, it was real. He recognized the place, Ilneon Dungeon, only this time it was whole and new. Around him stood robed figures, their attire matching his own. He had no idea who they were or why he was there. Suddenly, shouts echoed through the hall. An intruder had been spotted. Their leader ordered the elixir secured above all else. The words struck him like thunder. Elixir. The timeline, the new dungeon, the legends of its discovery, all of it clicked into place. He wasn't dreaming. He had gone back 10,000 years into the past, and the elixir was here. The cult leader confirmed its safety, and for the first time in years, Ransen felt a surge of hope. With that elixir, he could regain everything he had lost. But the hall wasn't empty. He sensed 12 presences nearby, strong and watchful. For a heartbeat, he considered ending them all, seizing the elixir for himself. But then orders rang out. Search the halls in pairs before the offering. The leader called out his name, assigning him to the northern passage with someone called Seruas. Ransen stiffened. How did they know him? Perhaps this was the work of the Holy Star, binding his fate to theirs. Seruas urged him forward, snapping him out of thought. For now, Ransen decided, he would play along. Knowledge was power, and patience might bring the perfect opening. Together, they moved down the shadowed corridor, until golden hair flashed before them. A woman stood waiting. Moments later, glowing purple blade appeared, cutting Seruas in half in an instant. Ransen's sword clashed with the attackers, sparks and strange flashes filling the hall. Each strike wore his weapon down, and the enemies as well. Breathing hard, Ransen narrowed his eyes. This was no ordinary sword aura. Something stranger, something deeper, was at play, and in that moment, he resolved to test this power for himself. Ransen froze when he noticed frightened children huddled in the shadows. Behind the yellow-haired attacker, he couldn't help but wonder, why were they here? The blonde knight stepped forward, shielding the children. Her voice was sharp with anger as she scolded him. How could a knight side with a cult that kidnapped children? Did he plan to use them as living sacrifices? For an instant, her words pierced deeper than any blade. Ransen's mind flashed with memories of his own children. Moments of laughter, warmth, and the life he had lost. Before the rest of the cult arrived, one of them rushed in, calling out to him, asking if Sir had fallen to the intruder. Ransen didn't let him finish. In one swift motion, he turned and struck them down. The blonde knight gasped in shock, but Ransen calmly told her they were on the same side, and if she wanted to live, they had to fight together. 2 more cultists arrived, shouting that 3 had already been slain by the intruder. One of them called for help, only to be cut down by Ransen's blade. The other, staring in disbelief, accused him of betrayal with his dying breath. Ransen stood among the fallen, telling the knight that thanks to her staged fight, eliminating them was easy. She stared at him in confusion, insisting she hadn't been faking anything, she was only defending herself against his strikes. Ransen gave a half smile and suggested she just keep helping him like that. It was then the cult leader himself appeared, Celtic. His sinister grin cut through the air as he asked Ransen directly if he had betrayed them. He even twisted the deaths of the fallen into something pleasing, claiming that betrayal itself would feed their master's power. The blonde knight's heart sank. Celtic was no ordinary foe. He was at the level of an advanced expert, while she herself was only mid-rank. She regretted not calling for backup, but it was too late. She decided to attack first, hoping to give Ransen an opening. Her blade clashed with Celtic's in a storm of sparks, but he brushed her aside with brutal ease, sending her tumbling back. She charged again, but he dodged and prepared a crushing counterattack. At that critical moment, a flash of blue aura split the air. Ransen appeared at incredible speed, unleashing his storm technique and slashing at Celtic's neck. The strike landed, but instead of falling, Celtic's necklace glowed, saving him from death. With a wicked smile, he admitted that without it, he would already be gone. The battle raged, red aura against blue, Celtic's strike swift and unpredictable. Ransen struggled, wondering how the knight had lasted against such overwhelming power. She tried to flank Celtic, but he blocked her with ease. She shouted at Ransen, demanding to know why his aura felt so weak despite its brilliant color. Celtic mocked him cruelly. Having an aura meant nothing if one couldn't read the heart of the sword. He called Ransen a mere novice before launching a devastating attack. But that insult struck something deep within him. He remembered the past, his years as a swordmaster, once a living weapon on the battlefield. With his pride burning, Ransen glared at Celtic and challenged him. Was this the novice he spoke of? His aura flared, threads of blue weaving through the air. With a new technique, Aura Thread, Ransen unleashed a storm of razor-fine lines that sliced through Celtic's defenses. The cult leader's eyes widened in shock as the threads closed in. A final strike severed his head, ending the battle. The room fell silent. Ransen collapsed, coughing blood, drained but alive. The blonde knight, still trembling, stared at him in disbelief. "Who are you?" she whispered. But Ransen didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on Celtic's body. With trembling hands, he searched until he found it. A small box. Inside rested the elixir. A triumphant smile spread across his face as he declared, at last, he had found it. The blonde knight stepped forward, demanding to know what he was doing. Before he could finish the elixir, however, his body flickered and vanished. The vial slipped from his grasp, tumbling to the floor. The knight stood frozen in confusion and awe. An old pocket watch sank beneath the water's surface, marking the end of Ransen's journey into the past. In the present, Daisy wandered restlessly, her heart heavy with regret. She called Ransen brother, a word that left her own lips trembling. She asked Sir Bersun if he had seen him, confessing that she needed to apologize. But Bersun could only shake his head. Desperate, Daisy rushed to Ransen's room. When she pushed the door open, the sight before her nearly stopped her heart. Ransen lay collapsed on the floor, unconscious and drenched in blood. She screamed his name and fell to his side. Later, as he rested in bed, Bersun asked Daisy to call him when Ransen woke. She promised she wouldn't leave. Sitting by his side, Daisy's thoughts grew darker. He had once been the strongest among them, and now he suffered because of them. The shame weighed so heavily, she wished she could carry the pain instead. Suddenly, Ransen woke with a sharp gasp. His eyes darted to his prosthetic hand, panic flashing across his face as he remembered. He had only drunk half the elixir. He sat up quickly, confused, wondering if it had all been a dream, but the familiar room told him otherwise. Daisy leaned close, her eyes full of worry. She asked where he had gone, why he disappeared, and why he returned covered in blood. Ransen only stared at her quietly until she fidgeted under his gaze. Finally, he broke into a faint smile and asked if she had really called him brother. Daisy's cheeks flushed red, and she denied it. But Ransen noticed her swollen eyes and teased, asking if she had been crying. But the warmth was short-lived. He suddenly staggered, dizziness overtaking him. Daisy rushed to support him as he groaned. Then, in shock, his prosthetic parts began falling away one by one. His limbs, once lost, had returned. Daisy stood frozen as Ransen whispered, almost in disbelief, "I've returned." But the strain overwhelmed his body, and he collapsed again as Daisy cried out his name. When he next opened his eyes, he saw the children gathered around him, wide-eyed with awe. Even Berson was speechless, staring at the man who had miraculously grown back his arms and legs. He asked how this was possible. Calmly, Ransen explained. He had drunk the elixir. Bersun was stunned. The legendary medicine? A single sip worth more than 50,000 in gold? Standing slowly, he reassured Bersun that he could move, though some rehabilitation might be needed. Together, they went to the ancient altar. Ransen explained how, during his time in the past, the guards had been strangely concentrated here. He suspected this altar was the key to something greater. When he placed the key, a glowing circle ignited, revealing a secret passage. What lay beyond left them breathless. A treasure room overflowing with gold coins, relics, and enchanted weapons. Berson could barely comprehend it, but Ransen's voice was steady. He admitted even he couldn't believe it, but revealed the shocking truth. He had traveled 10,000 years into the past. Berson was floored, unable to speak. Ransen confirmed it. His journey had been real, and if the artifact's power wasn't limited to one use, if he could return again and again, then nothing would be impossible. But for now, he said, there was something he had to do first. Meanwhile, Naggi lounged idly, thinking this was the true life and wondering what entertainment the day would bring. He decided to visit Ransen, the wreck, as he called him, but when he reached the door, his smile vanished. Standing before him was Ransen, whole, alive, his limbs restored. Naggi froze in disbelief, then panicked, ordering his men to flee and warn the Count. But before they could scatter, Ransen drew his sword. With a flash, his attack split in two, cutting down both of Naggi's fleeing comrades. Stunned, Naggi could only stare. Ransen's aura threads shimmered in the air as he closed the distance. Regaining his composure, Naggi scoffed. He noticed it wasn't a full aura blade, only threads, and mocked him. His core wasn't fully healed yet. Ransen's voice was sharp and steady. And what of it? You'll still receive my attack. Naggi sneered, boasting that he was no longer the same as 3 years ago. He was bloodkin now, of noble class, his body reinforced by vampire-like regeneration. With his power and aura combined, he claimed he could never die. Then the impossible happened. The strike slipped past his blade, rebounded, and came back to bite him. Naggi's head fell free from his shoulders. His body evaporated in a hush, like the legends say true monsters do when finally undone. Ransen watched, breath heavy. His core had returned, yes, but his aura was still scattered, like a fire not yet coaxed into a steady flame. Later, in the quiet that followed, the questions came. Daisy wanted to know if it was true. Had he really gone back in time after drinking the elixir? Ransen nodded. He'd used the Vanroa family treasure, the Book of Fate, and a flash of light had sent him 10,000 years into the past. Bersun asked if he could go again. Ransen admitted he didn't know. The artifact hadn't reacted since that night, and the book's mechanics remained a mystery. Saya, heiress of Ilneon, offered a possibility. If the treasure was forged in the Age of Magic, divine power could be trapped in small things. Daisy raised a practical point about the elixir. Legend said it was discovered 200 years ago. If Ransen drank it 10,000 years earlier, how could that be? The answer came clean and ugly. He'd only drunk half the bottle. History had been altered, or at least left incomplete, because of that single sip. Ransen asked if any records mentioned a half bottle. Berson did not know. Sia warned plainly. If he could return to the past again, every action could reshape the world. Then she asked the question that mattered. What would he do if given the chance? Ransen's voice was steady and cold with purpose. First, avenge his parents and siblings. Second, restore his duty as the last scion of Vanroa. Ultimately, rebuild the kingdom. But the immediate obstacle was Count Xias, and he had to die. Sia warned that Xias was no ordinary foe. He had already been a swordmaster, and after absorbing Delkashu's pure blood, who could say how much stronger he'd become? Ransen answered simply, this wasn't optional. If Xias discovered Ransen's recovery, madness or worse would follow. The Count would act without restraint. They had to strike before Xias used the nobles as offerings in his rituals. Ransen went quiet, isolating himself to train. He tried to master the harsh, unyielding sword style he'd seen in the cult, the same sharp, piercing aura that had almost killed him in the past. Celtic's taunt, that Ransen couldn't read the heart of the sword, echoed in his head, but the meaning had changed. It wasn't about speaking to the blade, it was about becoming the sword and soul moving as one. With that realization, Ransen felt a new strand of power beginning to weave through his own aura. Training didn't last long. Daisy burst in, breathless and panicked. Something had happened. Something about Count Xias. News filtered in from the Count's castle. Xias had invited Ransen's family to the castle in 3 days' time. Burson guessed Xias might have noticed Ransen's recovery and Naggi's death. Sia shook her head. The Count would assume rebels had acted. The real problem was timing. The invitation ruined their plan to assassinate him in the way they'd intended. Their only chance would be to strike during one of Xias's solitary rituals. Sia explained the Count's pattern. Since his injury, Xias left the castle once a month for private rites. Daisy added the worst detail. Xias's men had been kidnapping children and eradicating villages that failed to pay taxes, using the bodies as offerings in those rituals. Sia relied on her intelligence network. She'd been watching Kushan closely, but she'd been reckless. Ransen scolded her for going alone in such a dangerous city. Sir Bursoon defended her, reminding them she was 20 and not a child. The debate was brief. They had little time, 3 weeks before the tax report, the ritual window, and they had to move. Daisy asked the blunt question many of them were afraid to say aloud. Could Ransen actually kill Xias? Ransen looked at the sword in his hand, the blade of Vanroa. Bursoon's voice trembled with recognition. It was the king's sword, forged from silver steel that fell from the sky, steeped with aura. Corrupted beings, vampires and the like, could not withstand it. Sia offered a dry, nervous joke. Trust him, she said. And if they failed, well, at least they'd go down together. Ransen was annoyed by the gallows humor and rebuked her gently. They had one dangerous option, and for now, it was the only option. Ransen tightened his grip on the Vanroa blade. In the quiet village of Luera, children laughed as they compared the mushrooms they had gathered, arguing playfully over whose was the largest. One boy shouted that they should measure them when they got home. But before their laughter could fade, fire erupted in the village. The children froze in shock as chaos engulfed their homes. Soldiers in armor, their faces hidden behind skull-like masks, stormed through the streets. Villagers fell one after another, their bodies tossed into carts like objects. Then the soldiers turned their gaze toward the children. An order rang out. No one was to escape. Surrounded, the children cried in terror as the soldiers closed in. But then, arrows cut through the air. Several soldiers collapsed before they could reach the little ones. A lone figure stepped forward. "Are you all right?" the man asked. The boy at the front looked up, wide-eyed. Who are you?" "Rivera Pietro," the man replied simply. The name spread in a whisper among the children. The boy gasped. "You're a baron?" Rivera gave a faint smile. "Explanations later. For now, we have to leave." But the children shook their heads, sobbing that their mothers were still in the village. Rivera's jaw tightened. He knew saving a handful of innocents couldn't stop the wider massacre. Under his breath, heavy with regret, he muttered, "The Count has gone too far this time." Meanwhile, in the Count's castle, carts of bodies were delivered. A soldier reported the number with grim pride, 116. More than what was required. Xias, in his monstrous form, dismissed them with a wave. Alone, he prepared for his ritual. His smile widened as he thought of tomorrow, when Ransen's family would arrive. The moment he had long awaited was finally close. Dark energy coiled around him as he drew power from the corpses. But suddenly, he froze. Pulling back a cover, he was startled to find an intruder among the dead. It was Ransen. The scene shifted back to Sia's plan. She had suggested he hide in the carts, suppressing his energy until the right moment. Now, standing before the Count, Ransen faced his foe directly. Sia sneered, mocking his recovery. "So, you found an elixir." The time for strategy had ended. Now came the fight. Xias's red aura surged like a storm, clashing against the piercing blue of Ransen's blade. Their strikes split the air, explosions rocking the chamber. Each blow was fast enough to split stone. Each dodge was the difference between life and death. The Count admitted Ransen's attack had nearly taken his head. "Impressive," he said, with a sly grin. "As expected of a son of Vanroa, you must be the second prince, the one whose body was never found." Ransen's eyes narrowed, but Xias only pressed on. "A rare discovery indeed. Offer me your soul, and I'll grant you your deepest desire." Ransen's only answer was another attack. Steel met crimson energy, blue light colliding with red in a violent shockwave. Elsewhere, Rivera had gathered his men. They asked why he had summoned them so suddenly. Rivera explained he had received intelligence of something extraordinary. Before he could finish, the sky itself answered. A massive flare of red lit the horizon. "It's Xias," one of the men whispered, trembling. They watched in stunned silence as a second light appeared, blue against the red. One soldier lowered his binoculars, voice trembling. "It's Ransen." Rivera remembered Sia's words, that this was Ransen's last chance, and hesitation now would only lead to regret. But doubts gnawed at him. Could Ransen truly defeat the Count? They were rebels, not heroes. Saving children was already their limit. Stepping into this fight could mean the end of them all. One of his men broke the silence. "So, do we just stand here and watch?" Rivera looked at the horizon, where blue and red light clashed like gods at war. His decision weighed heavily, but at last, he spoke. "No, we move. We can't just stand by." Back on the battlefield, steel clashed with crimson energy as Ransen and the Count exchanged furious blows. Exhausted but unyielding, Ransen roared and unleashed another strike. The Count staggered back in shock, his neck cut, blood flowing. Fury twisted across the Count's face. He cursed Ransen, clutching his wound. Yet, even through the pain, he admitted grudgingly, "Your swordsmanship, magnificent. Perhaps one day you might break through my defense, if you can reach me first." With that, the Count summoned an army of his followers. Shadows swarmed the chamber as an endless tide of vampires rushed forward. Ransen grit his teeth in frustration. His plan had been to face the Count alone, not drown in a sea of enemies. Dodging the first attack with ease, he muttered to himself that he'd have to cut through them quickly. But before he could even move, a silver arrow whistled through the air, striking a vampire cleanly. The creatures froze, stunned by the aura-filled weapon. The Count's eyes narrowed. Who dares interfere? The answer came as Rivera Pietro stepped out of the shadows, bow drawn, and he wasn't alone. Salzran appeared beside him, calling Ransen brother. Moments later, Ka, Daisy, and even Seklen arrived, followed by Rivera's deputy and his knights. The battlefield erupted. Rivera's arrows struck true, dropping vampires one after another. Daisy and Seklen fought fearlessly, blades flashing. Meanwhile, Sia calmly directed the flow of battle, her sharp voice keeping their side organized amidst the chaos. But Ransen's heart pounded with worry. "Why are you all here?" he shouted. "You'll get hurt." Daisy turned mid-swing, giving him a sharp look. "Why do you always try to shoulder everything alone? We're not kids anymore. This is our fight too." Salzran nodded firmly. "She's right. Leave the rest to us. Focus on the Count." Ransen blinked, then a small smile tugged at his lips. Maybe it was time to stop treating them as fragile children. He turned back toward the Count, gripping his sword tightly. The Count smirked darkly. "I'll start by tearing off your arm." His hand twisted and grew, transforming into a massive red claw. He swung with brutal force, only to be blasted back as Ransen's necklace flared with golden light. The barrier exploded outward, severing the claw completely. The Count stared in disbelief at the stump where his hand had been. "Impossible!" Ransen held the broken necklace in his palm, an artifact from the ruins. "I regret shattering it, but it did its job." With a deep breath, he declared, "After every full-force attack, a gap always appears in the defense, and this time, it's wide open." Channeling his energy, he merged his spirit with his blade. A violent whirlwind of blue light surged around him, roaring like a storm. The Count bellowed, his crimson aura flaring. "You'll die here, Ransen!" He hurled his energy at the storm, but the whirlwind devoured it whole, surging forward without faltering. The clash shattered the chamber. Step by step, Ransen's storm broke through until a crack appeared in the Count's protective aura. With one final strike, he drove his blade through the opening. The Count collapsed, gasping his final breath. His voice trembled with disbelief. "Was that the soul blade?" Ransen exhaled slowly. "I don't know. I just tried to blend ancient sword energy with aura. Maybe it became the soul blade." As the Count fell silent, his followers screamed in agony. One after another, they collapsed. Rivera's men looked around in shock. "What's happening to them?" Rivera explained. "When a vampire loses their master, they lose their minds for a day or two. This is our chance to finish them." Ransen asked, "And after that?" "They return to normal," Rivera assured him. Then, with quiet determination, he said, "We'll take care of the rest before dawn." Ransen nodded. Rivera stepped closer, voice filled with gratitude. "You've given us the chance to avenge our comrades. Thank you." Ransen shook his head. "We're the ones indebted to you. Let's build a city where people can live without fear." Rivera smiled faintly, then revealed his family crest. "I had planned to wait, but this moment can't be delayed. The Pietro family once stood among Gloryland's nobility 3 centuries ago. From this day on, I swear loyalty to you as my lord." Later, Ransen walked with Sia. She smirked knowingly. "I expected Rivera to go that far." Ransen blinked in surprise. "You knew him that well?" "Enough," she replied, arms folded. "We exchanged information. Some assistance here and there." Ransen's eyes widened. "You worked with his forces? That was dangerous." She only shrugged. "It was necessary." Then her tone sharpened. "Let Rivera handle the remaining vampires. Our focus should be finding proof of the Count's crimes. The more we destroy his reputation, the more the people will support us." Ransen nodded slowly, realizing she was right. The investigation team was quickly assembled, bringing together merchants, citizens, and nobles alike. Their task was clear: uncover the Count's secrets. Inside the castle's church, Sia glanced around with a bored expression. "This place doesn't seem special," she remarked. Ransen agreed, though both admitted the strange stone statue looming nearby was more than a little unsettling. Then Sia's eyes fell on the necklace Ransen wore. Where did you get it?" she asked. Before he could answer, the necklace began to glow. Ransen froze. At the same time, the Book of Fate in his possession lit up with the same green radiance. "Try opening it," Sia urged, but Ransen shook his head firmly. "No. If I vanish again, every faction in this city will pounce to take control." "For once," Sia agreed. "Then hide it, quickly." But the book had its own plans. It opened by itself, revealing glowing words about the Lord of the Clear Sky and the cult's treasure. The royal seal burned bright, and in a flash, Ransen was gone. When he opened his eyes, he was no longer in the church. He sat in a rattling cart, rolling across a vast plain. A robed man sat across from him, exuding such overwhelming pressure that Ransen's instincts screamed in warning. The man looked at him calmly. "Awake at last, Ransen?" Ransen swallowed hard. This wasn't like the cult leader he had faced before. The very air itself swirled with the man's mana, bending to his presence. Even a grandmaster would struggle to comprehend such power. The stranger introduced himself as Grand Duke Rhytna Celsius. He explained that fate had brought them together, and that by chance, he had taken Ransen as his disciple only a week earlier. Ransen blinked. "A week?" An escort riding nearby confirmed the claim, saying the Duke had indeed accepted Ransen 7 days ago. The Duke chuckled softly. "Strange, isn't it? Almost as if this meeting was meant to be." Unlike the cult, who treated him as nothing more than a tool, this man spoke gently, almost warmly. Still, Ransen's suspicion grew. Did the Duke know who he truly was? Carefully, Ransen asked, "Are you sure about your decision, Master? You don't even know who I really am." The Duke studied him for a long moment, then replied, "Perhaps I don't. But if this path aligns with my purpose, then it must be something I agreed to long ago. A feeling, nothing more." That answer unsettled Ransen even further. What kind of man trusted a feeling over facts? Soon, the cart rolled to a halt before a colossal fortress, the city of glowing steel, where the Duke resided. Along the way, the Duke explained customs, etiquette, and even the finer points of noble life. Bit by bit, Ransen adapted, deciding that since he couldn't yet return, he would use this chance to gain new skills. The Duke also mentioned that Ransen would soon meet another disciple, an earnest knight in training. And then Ransen froze. Standing in the courtyard was none other than the blonde knight he had once met in a previous journey to the past. Their eyes widened in mutual shock. The Duke noticed. "So, you two already know each other?" The knight confirmed, reminding her master of the stranger who had once helped her in the cult's church. The Duke's smile widened. "Excellent. Then this will be easier. Ransen, from now on, you will be her junior. I trust she'll guide you well." The blonde knight nearly dropped her sword. "Junior? Him?" The Duke excused himself, leaving them behind. Ransen, attempting politeness, extended a hand. "Good to see you again." "Stop," she snapped. "That is not how you greet a senior." Ransen blinked, caught off guard. With sharp eyes, she began to scold him. "Your cloak is crooked. Your boots haven't been polished in days. And your hair? Honestly, do you want people to think you're a wandering bandit?" Ransen raised an eyebrow, muttering under his breath. says the one with that hairstyle. She stiffened, touched her hair, and suddenly flushed bright red. Without another word, she spun around and stormed off, while the nearby knights whispered with smirks, "There she goes again, finding fault in everyone." Ransen couldn't help but smile quietly. Later, on the training grounds, she introduced herself formally as Iodin Sarum, Knight of the Grand Duke's Guard, and a member of the Horizon Knight Squad. "I admit," she said sternly, "you may be stronger than me, but our master told me you still cannot properly control your sword energy. Swordsmanship is best learned through combat. Draw your blade." She leveled her sword at him, her eyes blazing. "And don't misunderstand, this isn't because of my earlier embarrassment." Ransen sighed, unsheathing his weapon. "Right, words don't matter now, only the sword does.